declare.
We're on.
Good afternoon. I declare the ordinary meeting open. I would like to acknowledge that today we are meeting on the traditional lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I know that everyone is in attendance and there are no apologies. There are two sets of minutes for confirmation today. Firstly, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of March 2020. Do I have a mover and a seconder for these?
So move, Madam Chair.
I'll second it.
Mover, Councillor Jurcevic, seconder, Councillor Stockwell. All those, any issues with those minutes? All those in favour? Taken as read and accepted, carried unanimously. The second set of minutes are the minutes of the post-election meeting held on the 17th of April.
Madam Chair.
Thank
What
you,
a great
Councillor
day it
Walker
was.
I'll second that.
Seconder, thank you, Councillor Lauriston. All in favour? Carried unanimously, taken as read. Thank you. There are no mayoral minutes. Councillors, any petitions? Okay, moving on. No notified motions, and there are no presentations or deputations. Unusually, we don't have any consideration of committee meeting recommendations today. So we'll be starting on our committee meetings next month. Today we have a number of staff reports for this ordinary meeting. First up is the monthly financial report. Councillors, there is a staff recommendation on page 5 of the agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
Happy to move it. I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell and Poininger. Any questions in regard to
We
these?
have to talk to it first.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Stockwell.
Yeah, I think this gives us an analysis of leading into the current climate of COVID-19. Obviously, we're tracking quite well, except for the obviously the June forecast for operating revenue. No doubt we will be not immune to the downturn in the economy, and particularly the revenue that we would be getting from our facilities, such as the caravan parks, the J and the Noosa Aquatic Centre. And obviously what the rest of the report does is reassure us that we are tracking quite well in terms of our position leading into the current downturn, and hopefully that will serve us well during the coming months and years.
Would anyone else like to? Any questions? Anyone else like to speak?
I'll ask a question if I may. Question of Michael, wherever he is, behind me. Bit of an interpretation I see in the media today with regard to the statement: total cash on hand at the end of March was 76 million. Cash on hand will now degrade by approximately 40 million as operational capital costs are incurred through to June 2020. That degradation, I take it, is not only not factored taking COVID into consideration, but also considering normal operations of council. Is that correct?
Yeah, through the chair, that is correct. There was a little bit of misinformation reported this morning. Yeah, that councillors, as part of our normal cash flow cycle, we receive a lot of our revenues in advance, our rates and charges, which we did in January, and as we then spend those funds over the following 6 months, we rate twice yearly. We spend those funds on our capital expenditure and our operating expenditure. So the cash flow, the $40 million degradation of our cash is typical of our cycle. So that's not so much purely COVID related as reported in the media this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. I have a question. Michael, on page 9, regarding the capital works expenditure, there's a 4.3 million underspend. Did a project come in under budget, or was scope of works changed in that regard?
Yep. We have a number of projects in the capital program, probably over 60 or 70 projects. So obviously there's a lot of ins and outs between each of those projects. We've done a lot of work over the last 2 weeks with our infrastructure team to look at our forecast. They're actually forecasting that we'll spend of that total program, I think up to everything but about $2 million based on the timing of project delivery. So we're comfortable that we'll achieve a very high proportion of spend on our capital program.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think that answers the question I was going to ask.
Brian?
I'd just like to ask one question of Michael. Under the category of materials and services, you've listed some significant categories. I was just trying to find costs for consultant and consultancy fees. Is that covered under that category?
Yes, through the chair. Look, consulting fees forms part of materials and services. Whilst we don't specifically report on that as a line item in the monthly reporting, that's actually contained within a lot of those different categories, i.e. waste management and development assessment and so on. So there's, I think as I mentioned to councillors in a prior, there's different ways and means we can report on our performance, and more than happy to take suggestions on how we can improve our reporting to improve transparency. So
Thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
So just as an explanation of what does appear in the report with regard to the items listed as category summary and comments, the items are of concern that are either under or over budget at this present time. Is that correct?
So I'll just get you the
So,
question.
Michael, I think the question was in the actual report, the monthly report.
Why only
normally reporting those things that are under or over budget. We don't report every single line item that's still on budget.
Yes, so through the chair, yeah, that's correct. We generally try and report on significant variances that we consider council needs to be aware of to help manage our budget and how we deliver services to the community.
Thanks, Michael. Brian?
Thanks, Frank.
Put the vote up. Is everyone in favour of? Right, carried unanimously. Thank you. There is, councillors, there is a staff recommendation on page 18 of the agenda. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
This is in relation to the 2024 Venture Drive.
Yeah, who wants to move it?
I'll move it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm happy to
Councillor
second
Wilkie,
that.
thank you, Councillor Roniston.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Probably a question for Billy. The gym application is recommended for approval. There were some concerns you had about car parking, and it's a performance-based planning scheme, so you've proposed some solutions to manage the perceived shortfall in car parking. Can you just talk us through what some of those, how you propose to manage those impacts of car parking?
Are you talking to your motion or are you asking a question?
Just ask a question. I can ask a question at any time, can't I?
He can waive his right to speak to it, then ask him.
That's what I'm saying, you wouldn't waive your right to speak to it.
Yeah.
So yes, Frank, that's correct. But in this instance, the applicant has put forward the solution, and in this instance, we consider it reasonable to manage car parking. There is still some concerns, and that's why we placed the condition on there for this to be reviewed in 2 years' time, essentially once it commences operations. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so it's how do you propose? What are the specifics of how you propose to manage
Yes,
these?
certainly. So in that regard, the applicant has proposed to limit the maximum number of users to 27, and the way that they're limiting that is using an online booking system. It's understood that, or perhaps we're unaware of whether there's any other gyms in the Noosa area that operate that way. The applicant has put that forward to operate in such a manner. And we consider that may be reasonable, or that is reasonable to address the car parking concerns. And as I say, council can review that in 2 years' time. Okay.
Will there be ongoing monitoring of that situation, Billy?
Yes, that's correct. So we can monitor that through our compliance officer and the like to keep an eye on how that situation is progressing, how that use is operating. Also, there is the ability for other property owners in the area to make comment to council on how that is progressing forward.
Thank you.
I believe it's correct that the applicant actually was requested to provide parking surveys for these two existing car parks. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And they did not provide car parking surveys from other gyms,
Yeah.
but they did provide a survey from their existing gym at the Noosa Civic site.
And you were satisfied with the car parking arrangements that they came to?
Not necessarily in relation to the surveys,
Yeah.
but in relation to the maximum number of users that are capped,
Yeah.
proposed to be capped, and therefore, yes, we consider that reasonable in this instance based on the number of spaces provided on site.
And I believe there's a 2-year reassessment after 2 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll ask a question along the same lines, if I may. I mean, with regard to the capping of patrons at 27, is there any way, apart from officers attending, of ensuring that's being done? I.e., are there any record keeping, or is there any way of limiting or managing through the software the number of patrons allowed at any one time?
Yes, that's a good question, Joe. So the applicant suggests that they do have a number of data mechanisms as far as CCTV, data logging when the access card is used to access the site. So therefore, at any one time, they could potentially provide that data to demonstrate that they're complying with their approval.
Thank you. Second question, if I may. Reading through on page 22, the paragraph, second paragraph above the table at the end, it says proposed gym currently well located in Noosa Civic. The second sentence goes on, this is the only reason given by the applicant for the proposed relocation. It's therefore difficult to reconcile that there is any real planning need for this gym to operate in the industrial area that warrants approving an inconsistent use in the industrial area. Can you just outline why, after making that statement, that we are approving the gym in the industrial area?
Yes, so essentially in the past, under the current planning scheme, council has approved a number of gyms in the industrial area, in the Noosaville industrial area, and looking forward under the draft planning scheme, the scheme nominates this site as a consistent, or nominates this site for a gym to be a consistent use, therefore intending that some of these types of uses will occur in this area.
So just to clarify, that reference is to the old planning scheme, and the new planning scheme gives a greater leniency towards an activity of this sort in that element of the industrial area.
Yes, so based on past decisions and the planning scheme moving forward, it's considered reasonable, or perhaps unreasonable for council for us to recommend to refuse it.
Thank you.
Right.
On the same stream, you have made reference to the new planning scheme, and we can place significant weight on it at the moment, but does the new planning scheme have a different method of calculating car parking spaces, and what would that recommend?
So essentially the car parking rate is consistent with the current scheme. It requires 1 space per 20 square metres of floor area to be provided, for car parking to be provided that rate, which is generally consistent with our current scheme. However, we have taken a different approach in this instance using council's traffic engineer consultant advice in relation to how this particular model of gym and proposal is proposed in this instance.
Can I just then give you some time to breathe? I think it's probably manager of development control. Have we ever exercised the same level of discretion in recent history? Like, you know, it's a fairly significant variation, nearly 50% of car parking requirements. Would this be have we ever done it? And are we confident if we haven't, that the ability to control, even though it's a user control system, to control use by an electronic system doesn't set an undesirable precedent for future people trying to once again reduce car parking to this level?
So the car parking rate of 1 per 20 is a probable solution of the planning scheme. So what we're looking at is the performance outcomes of the scheme to make sure that car parking demand will be satisfied on site. So we looked at that in terms of their proposal to limit the number of members on site at any time and the way they would go about doing that. We've never seen that working before. We're not aware of any other gyms that operate that way. But we think it's a reasonable solution that they've proposed. But we have recommended a 2-year limit in order to monitor that and make sure. answered all your questions. I think it was
In
on
terms of risk in the future, you're saying it's a performance solution. You're saying it's a performance-based solution, and you're happy with it. If I can just then follow on, as a first trial, would a 1 year trial period be more in keeping with something we've done previously, say like village bicycles at Noosa Junction?
I thought a two-year time frame is probably more appropriate. The business is moving tenancies, so a 12-month period is a very short time frame for them to take on a new tenancy. The area is quite a newly developing industrial area, so there's not a lot of other businesses in the area, so if it does become a problem, it's not likely to become a problem. If parking doesn't work, if the way their strategy doesn't work, it's not likely to become a parking problem in the short term, because the land's still developing in that area and they'll take up that street parking. But I thought the 2 year period was a reasonable time for a business that's going to make that, take up a lease and that commitment.
Just ask, sorry, Madam Chair.
you.
2 year time frame, we're still in shutdown because of COVID. Was the 2 year time frame the consideration to giving 2 years as opposed to 1 year? Did that take into account perhaps the shutdowns that their businesses experience because of COVID, or that would be a standard time frame that you would normally apply?
I have to say I didn't consider COVID, although I do know that gyms are not allowed to operate at this time.
Yes.
I guess it's difficult to know at what point they're going to open again. But I thought the 2 year time period, I still think that's probably a reasonable time frame, but that's something that the applicant could ask for an extension on if need be. I know it's a difficult thing to answer, Councillor, because we don't know when gyms will be able to operate again.
Yeah, that was my question exactly, just in regard to COVID, if that was a consideration. But I think for 2 years, as you explained, that's a good time to get a business up and running, especially considering they haven't even moved at this stage.
Given that the business is currently operating, have they given any indication of when their peak access times are currently? Because operating in the industrial area, obviously the industrial area only is primarily functions, and we've got this with other operators in the area, parking restrictions at certain hours. Is that something that's been considered by staff?
So in relation to their current operations at the Noosaville site, they suggest their busiest times are in the morning around 7 AM from my understanding, from my recollection, but also in the afternoon around 5 o'clock or so. Which is, typical of a gym club use.
Okay.
Thank you. I just have a question around the proposed booking system. In the report, it says that it may not be able to be suitably implemented and may be difficult to enforce. How do you propose to monitor the booking system and its effectiveness over that 2 year time frame that you're proposing?
Yes, so there was some concerns around this type of business model operating in the industrial area due to the car parking concerns. Now our understanding is that there isn't any other gyms perhaps in the Noosa area that operate in such a manner. So we were concerned that primarily in the first instance that it may not be suitable for the gym to operate as such, but given there is mechanisms such as the data, the applicant can provide the data that they will gain through access, CCTV, etc. They can provide that to council at any one time. The council may ask for it, but also our compliance team could monitor the situation, as well as adjoining property owners can obviously comment to the council, as I say. Sorry, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Can I ask again? Yeah. So I'm just wondering then, how are you going to measure that and not leave it up to a random, like someone might complain or whatever? Are you going to have like measured time frames where you'll collect that data?
Yeah, look, I think it would be reasonably easy to monitor in that we can go to the site at random times, at their peak times, and observe what's going on in terms of who's parking on site, actually going into the gym, looking at numbers in the gym. I think that's reasonably a simple matter to monitor. And we won't be out there 7 days a week. We'll be out there on a sort of random basis from time to time to have a look at it.
Just further on your assessment that it's a developing area, and I can see on the map on page 20, which might be useful to bring up, or the image. Am I correct in saying that diagonally opposite this side, on the other side of the T intersection, is Land and Sea Brewery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would I say that the vacant block immediately opposite has approval for a chocolate factory with a cafe that might attract tourists?
Yeah.
So it would probably be, no, I'll leave the rest to the debate. Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? Anyone else?
Yeah.
Tom.
Just almost like a statement, but it's a funny situation where it's precarious. It's a grey area as to whether there's going to be enough parking spots or whether there's not going to be enough parking spots. And of course, there's a conflict because the gym's going to want to get as many people in as they can to make them happy, but there's a conflict with, you know, the parking area. But on the other hand, it's a 24-hour gym, so that when people come early, they come late at night, you know, so the parking will only be an issue during certain parts of the day. So it seems that you have your work cut out for you, checking up on that and making sure that everybody's happy, especially with the development of that new place. So,
Is that a question?
the question is, I hope that you can get up with it. Karen, good luck.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion?
I've got one more question, just because I'm considering an amendment. The current condition 11, which is on page 18, suggests this development approval lapses 2 years after the commencement of the use. So that's after they've moved and started the operation?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to move an amendment. And that amendment is simply to change that this development approval lapses 1 year after the commencement of the use, unless further extended by council in writing and elsewhere.
Anyone second that?
Yeah, for the sake of argument, I'll second that.
Okay, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I will, because I do think it is precedent setting. I hope it works. But I do know that it's difficult to get an on-street park in that area already. There is a number, as I said, there is one existing use that will have a non-industrial use area, non-industrial use visitation during that period. And I just think that if I was a neighbouring use, say for example like the existing chocolate factory that may get developed over in the coming times, if one use was having a precedent by using an electronic system, I just think that a year after commencement is a good time to review, and if it's working, I'm quite happy for it then to go unconditional. I just think that there became parking problems and we had neighbouring uses that were complaining about that parking problem, that we'd be in a much better spot if it was a shorter term rather than the 2 years.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion? Yeah, Chloe.
Amendment.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll put a contrary view. Given the situation that all businesses are currently facing, gyms are shut down. This particular business not only has the challenge of not being able to take in customers of this clients at this time, but they also have to go through the process of shifting their entire business. I really think that 2 years is more of a reasonable time frame to allow them to at least establish themselves. We don't know whether after 12 months the restriction, gyms may still not be able to take in clients, and I think perhaps a 1 year time period unnecessarily cruels the business's chances, or any of us being able to see how it realistically and reasonably will be operating when things are back to normal. I think after 2 years we'll have a better idea of what the new normal will look like.
I agree with Councillor Wilkie. I know that it is 2 years from the commencement of the gym, but I think a gym, it takes a while to get members, it takes a while to establish the business. So I think actually 2 years is a fair time frame. I still think the amount of car parks with the amount of people that they have said it won't exceed is fair and reasonable. And I think it should stand as 2 years. Thank you.
I'd like to add to that, Claire. I also think that what Councillor Stockwell is proposing is an unreasonable imposition. I believe that the material change of use is consistent with the Venture Drive Enterprise Precinct, which says that the use is compatible with the surrounding industry uses. I've also taken the time to speak to people in the industrial area, and they actually welcome new businesses such as the gym.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion?
Can I just say something? Yeah, I agree with the time of the COVID, and I understand that businesses are struggling, but I would like to just make a comment that we don't want to fall into discrimination where one business can use an electric monitoring system or a computer-based system, and that begins to become a precedent where we define business can have car parking if they have the IT set up in their business to do so. We don't want to be seen to discriminate against businesses that do not have that ability to measure people coming in and out of their business and then allocate car parks based on an electronic system, which you yourself have already recommended that is not the best and that you're going to need to monitor that. So, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
Karen, just to clarify, it's not an online parking system, it's an online booking system.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, booking. Thank you, Amelia.
That's right.
Would anyone else like to ask a question or speak to the motion? Amended motion?
Look, I get the amendment with regard. There's a couple of points mentioned through this that I think need clarification. This isn't a new business; it's an existing business moving to a new location. So it's a business that's been established for some time and been operating for some time. But like the other councils in this difficult time, I see that the condition, and I'm sure that the staff have considered the 2-year time period appropriately, and I'm prepared to support the staff's original position of 2 years to give the business time to establish, and I'm sure that within that time we'll ascertain whether there are any challenges going forward with regard to the business operating and the parking restrictions in that area.
I'll ask a question, Madam Chair. Question of staff. What would be the challenges you as the planning authority faces with just a 1 year having the development approval lapse after 1 year? Why would you not support that time frame?
So when we impose conditions on approval, they have to, the Planning Act requires that they be reasonable and relevant. So we need to think carefully about that, so it's important that we consider that fully. I think a 1 year time frame would not be reasonable for a business in there. They have come up with a reasonable strategy to address the likely parking demand from this gym. It is, we haven't seen it before, and we're not sure it's the best solution, but it's still a practical solution that they've put forward and has the means to work. We are able to monitor it over the 2 year period, so there's still conditions that they have to comply with in that 2 year period that we can call them to if it's causing issues. So again, I think the 2 year period is probably more the reasonable period. The area is not all developed yet. The site's vacant, which means street parking is not taken up. So if it's not working very well, there is opportunity for patrons to park in the street that shouldn't cause parking issues. So that's why I'm thinking 2 year period is reasonable. If this was on the Noosa Road where parking and traffic was more critical, then the recommendation may be a little bit different.
Right of reply.
I think everyone's raised perfectly valid points. And talking to the amendment, I think Councillor Finzel has picked up on my chief concern, and that is about my concern is about equity between business and having an untried and unproven method of calculating car parking contributions. I do hope that the business is a success, and I can understand the points that have been raised that in terms of 2 years will give them more security. However, I do think looking at a broader area that if there is problems arise, the 2 years may create a rod for council's back if the system as proposed proves not to meet the standards we hope it would. Simple as that.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor.
Sorry. Yeah.
We might
Just got started. Sorry.
You get another chance to talk to the original motion.
We might vote on the amendment of Councillor Stockwell's. All in favour? Denied.
Yep.
6-1.
Two.
Okay, so
Councillor-
Councillor 2, I beg your pardon,
Yeah.
Councillor Finzel.
Against all the others. Yep.
Thank you.
That's my first 6-1. Thank you.
We'll go back to the original motion.
We haven't got the answer.
Yep, so,
So all of
yep, all in favour?
Go back to the original
The
motion.
original
And just
motion,
see if anyone wishes
Anyone
to
else
speak
wish
to
to
that.
speak to
the
that, or
original
are we
motion.
exhausted? Would you like to speak to the original motion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the precedence I believe that council is setting is a localised approach to industrial areas and flexibility. And I think that if that spills into other precincts, business precincts, I think the community will stand to benefit.
Thank you.
Look, I'll be supporting the motion. I think the business will not, through normal operating times, hinder the other uses in the industrial area. I think their peak times are outside of the typical uses, and I think that their car park challenges will be outside of normal operating hours of other businesses in the industrial area, except for possibly the likes of Land and Sea. And I don't see there being too many challenges here, and I'm sure that over the 2 years that we'll find that this business will be able to continue on in the long term.
Would anyone else like?
I do think it's a development that is consistent with the new planning scheme, and that's why I support it. I do think it will provide a good service, particularly actually at lunchtime for people working in industrial estate. I may even have a son who would move there. But I think on a whole, yeah, we have identified that there is this growing demand for this sort of activity within that particular precinct. It fits that, and I do hope that their system does operate well and doesn't create nightmares for surrounding users.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkie, you've brought it.
I think it's all been said, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We might take a vote on that motion. All in favour? Unanimous, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the material change of use application for a commercial business on page 29 of our agendas. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
Oh, look, I'll move it,
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair.
Councillor Wilkie.
There we go.
I'll second
Thank
it.
you, Councillor Johnston.
Yeah, thank you. I commend staff for their approach taken to this business. It is an anomaly. It does, and they've recognised that they have a historic commercial approval dating back to about 1969. It's allowed these sort of uses to take place in this situation. They've addressed car parking issues by providing more off-site parking, and yeah, I commend the staff for their approach in this particular instance.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Any questions? No right of reply.
Again, I commend staff, but just on a broader note, Madam Chair, I also like to commend the councillors for getting their heads around these planning reports that have come straight to an ordinary meeting. Normally they come through a committee system, and I think they've done very well to get their heads around these very complicated reports.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie.
At an ordinary meeting.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. We'll vote. We'll vote on the motion. All in favour? No. Thank you. Look, the next item is the Planning and Environment Court of Appeal number DB 897 relating to the refusal of an application for a material change of use for an NBN tower at 244 Tablelands Road, Cooran.
I think you got a couple of
I believe we
declarations.
have, yeah, I understand a couple of
On a call.
number of conflict of interest
Yes,
declarations.
I would like to declare a conflict of
What are the
interest.
Thank you.
Just
Councillor
need to
Kinsella.
read out what that interest is. It's up on the screen.
Up to the
Oh, on the
screen for
screen.
How do I read it?
Just read it.
I declared a real conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 175D of the Local Government Act 2009. As prior to my election to council, I signed a petition relating to this application.
Thank
Propose to
you.
leave the room.
Thank you, Councillor Mazel. Councillor Wilkie.
I'd like to declare a potential conflict of interest. I have a real conflict of interest in this matter as defined in section 17.5D of the Local Government Act 2009, as I currently have an NBN tower located on my property and receive income from the NBN via a lease agreement. I'll be
Thank
leaving
you.
the room.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
I move to.
Just wait.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, come out. Just wait. Let go.
Madam Chairman, I move to defer consideration of the matter to the May round of meetings to allow the new councillors time to obtain further information.
I'll second it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkie. Councillor Lawrence.
I recommend that we defer consideration to the May round of meetings so that the new councillors can obtain further information, briefing and advice in relation to the planning matter before us. The development application before us is contentious and in the public interest and requires more than 7 days to fully understand. 4 councillors have been in their position for less than 3 weeks. We have not had the advantage of 18 months consideration on the application before us that was afforded to the other 3 councillors. The Local Government Act, Councillor Code of Conduct, states that in making decisions in the public interest, councillors must commit to exercising proper diligence, care and attention. In order to do this, more information and time is required to reach an informed, considered and community benefiting decision. In the motion before us, we have been asked to agree to defend an appeal. I understand that this appeal has just been lodged since Council has refused the application in February 2020. I also understand that there are no current court orders and no mediation. In making an informed, considered decision, I would like to have more information regarding Council's mediation processes. Given that Council will be moving from a surplus to a deficit budget in 2020, it is important that Council adopt a conservative approach when it comes to spending public money. I would like to be convinced that my vote does not allow Council to use the process of planning by appeal as a tactic or strategy. It should be used only as a last resort. I would also like to be convinced that all forms of dispute resolution have been exhausted before approving Council's right to defend this appeal. I therefore request the CEO to take the necessary steps to provide the new councillors with the following so that we can better understand the application before us. Information in relation to alternate dispute resolution procedures that have been formally adopted into council practices. Minutes of mediation used by council during the DA process with NBN to prevent or de-escalate this dispute. Information regarding prospect of success, a cost-benefit analysis. Estimate of cost associating with defending the appeal, particularly if the matter proceeds to trial. A legal opinion as to the risk of the applicant making an application for cost against council in case we don't have a strong case. A briefing from the town planner and lawyers and a site inspection. In conclusion, if we agree to spend public money without proper attention to process and safeguards, we cut off possibilities and options. As a council, we must be satisfied that all forms of alternate dispute resolutions, including mediation with accredited mediators and independent third parties, have genuinely broken down and that there is no other option than to go to court. I therefore request more time and information to allow the 4 new councillors to exercise proper due diligence.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yeah, I've got a question because I suppose I understand the difficulty in coming to grips. Just a question, under the Planning Environment Court rules, do we have to defend the appeal before mediation is open to us under the courts?
Oh, sorry.
The answer in short is no. The court process provides for a mediation approach, so we will not get to trial without going through mediation first, which is a good practice to see if we can resolve the issues and differences between us. So in every court appeal there is an opportunity which can be asked by either party or will be directed by the court that you have mediation before we get too far along in the appeal. So that's, with this appeal, that is the next step in the process.
Thank you.
So just a further point, is there any other mechanisms under the Planning Environment Court Rules Act, any other mechanisms other than the single process of going to mediation and then court?
Well, council, mediation is held with the court registrar, so the court appoints a mediator to mediate between the parties, so it is a formal process. and there can be court orders that come out of the mediation. But there is also the opportunity of a without prejudice meeting between the two parties while we're in appeal and before the trial. The mediator doesn't attend, but nevertheless parties can discuss the matter, discuss the matter themselves in confidence. So that can occur as well.
And last question, the terminology defending the appeal, does that mean that the defending the appeal is saying we are going to court, or is it saying we recognise the appeals there and we'll enter into mediation or without prejudice meetings?
Defend the appeal does not mean we're going to trial. There's a whole process to go through. So we do not have advice on prospects, and that would be obtained before we end up in trial. We would get independent planning advice as well before we go to trial. So we would not end up in trial with all those things happening first. Defending is simply a process. If we choose not to defend this appeal, what happens is essentially the tower is approved. The judge will give us time to impose conditions, but those conditions cannot change once being applied for. So if we choose not to defend, that's what happens. The tower is approved. There's no opportunity for negotiation or the like. Saying that, we don't have to decide to defend the appeal today. That could be deferred for another point to allow councillors to feel comfortable in the decision they're making today.
And final question, you've been here for a fair while. Has Noosa Council ever not resolved not to defend an appeal on a decision of the council?
No, I've never seen that occur, and I don't think it would occur for many other councils. It's a difficult situation. I understand that the council who decided it was a prior council. We have a new council, and people are not fully across all the issues, so I understand why we might want to have a look at it a bit closer.
I think I'd like to speak for motion. I think that is the point. The point is that we just need some more information. We're I think day 10 into it, and I think the whole point is to obtain as much information as we can and have the due diligence and the due process, and then make an informed decision. I don't think it in any way determines what we'll do. I think it's just all about gathering information.
One final question. With regard to defending the appeal, following on from everything that Councillor Stockwell has asked, in the event that mediation doesn't resolve the issue and the matter is to go before the courts, does the matter come before council again?
It would come before council again if we get advice about prospects that our prospects are poor. So we would come back to council and advise council that our prospects are poor. Throughout the appeal process, there's also the case management working group that I mentioned to councillors last week, which is monitors and helps the strategy around appeals. But of course they don't make a decision. So yes, we'll come back to council again if we get advice of prospects or there's a proposed settlement on the table by the applicant. And that's the other option. We'll come back to council as well. If mediation comes to, we find some solutions, so we come back to council. The only thing we need to be, the only thing we need to be a little bit careful of is if we do not choose to defend an appeal, the further it gets down the track, the applicant may come back and seek costs against us because they're starting to prepare their case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kerry. I just want to reiterate that the
Question?
Sorry, point of order.
Okay, excuse me.
Councillor's talking to
my question is, during the development application process, does council use mediation as a way to de-escalate or prevent these disputes from actually surfacing?
There's no formal mediation process involved with DA. The Planning Act does not provide for it. Council does not have a formal process set up. I'm not quite sure how that would work for a development application because we've received an application, yep, and there's a process under the Planning Act that we're required to follow in reviewing the application. Throughout the process though, there's opportunities for the parties to discuss the matter and ask further questions. There's a formal information request which we made to the applicant. In this instance, we also spoke to the applicant during the decision period about our concerns for it and put forward our concerns and asked them to look at those issues. They came back and did reduce the tower height slightly. It went down 5 metres. But they didn't take anything else on. We were keen for them to find some other sites because we thought this was a problematic site. So we got to the point where there was quite a lot of discussion with the applicant, but no agreement in moving forward. So unfortunately, it does often take a situation where an appeal is lodged and both parties are having to put forward some money that sometimes solutions can be often found. A lot of our appeals don't actually end up in trial. Most get resolved in appeal early in the day.
Kerry, I have a question. It's just some conflicting information. On page 42 and 43 of the agenda, it says the Telecommunications Act 1997 enabling further extensions of up to 5 metres without further reference. And then it says extension of tower by up to 7 metres in total on page 43. Is that 7 metres including the antenna? Is that the differentiation?
Sorry, I've just missed what you said a little bit, but
sorry, it's just a differentiation by 2 metres, and I'm wondering if it's the 7 metres you've got in brackets, including antenna and the like, so they have the ability to extend it without having to return to council.
Yeah.
So I'm just, one side says 5 metres and one side says 7. Does that 7 is the differentiation the antenna?
It is.
Correct. Thank you. That's my question. Thank you.
Right.
I speak to the motion. Yeah, I'll never not vote to defend an appeal, but at this stage I accept on this particular application there may be no great rush. I will support the motion, however, noting that the long list of requests within the mover's speech, some of them are standard practice and some of them would go to unnecessary costs for a small appeal such as this, so I wouldn't necessarily endorse that nature of approach. But in this case, on staff's advice, that it's unlikely that a 1 month deferral on this particular topic is unlikely to lead to any reduction in council's position. I'm willing to support it. It must be made clear there is no opportunity to relitigate the application. The decision's made, it's a decision of this council, I represent this council.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkie?
Yeah, look, it's, personally speaking, it's hardwired me to always agree to resolve to defend an appeal. Noosa Council has always done that. Every council in Queensland does that. I take the point that unlike other town planning issues on the agenda, this one doesn't have a time frame attached, and that I do appreciate it can be a lot for new councillors to take in and to understand the process.
Yes.
And I feel that if we do defer the decision till the next round, when the report will come through perhaps the full committee system where it can be examined more fully, councillors can ask more questions in the meantime of staff, so they satisfy themselves that a fair and open process is abided by. I think that's entirely reasonable, and I want to give, there's got to be a grace period for new councillors to get across a lot of this stuff. It's very complicated, and if they're wanting to satisfy themselves that they're making the right decision, that's fine, but for me personally, I will always resolve to defend an appeal.
Thank you, Councillor.
I've got another question for staff. Given that, that proceedings are already underway, is there anything preventing staff from entering into mediation discussions at this point in time while a deferral may be on the table?
Well, the motion to defend the appeal reassures staff that yes, you want us to spend time involved in the appeal. So it takes some time to prepare for mediation, for council solicitors to look at it. So I guess there's there's a little bit of concern there. It's where we're going with this one. We don't have a direction from council around whether we're going to defend this appeal or not. If there is
maybe just add to that, Kerry, maybe another way of asking that question to clarify. There's no mediation or any court process planned for next month, as I'm aware. Is that right?
No, there's none booked at this stage.
That's the
Okay, so just to clarify, there'd be no impact in this deferral as proceedings haven't been underway at this stage.
The court, once an appeal is lodged, will order proceedings if nothing's happened in 3 months of an appeal. So the appeal would have been lodged within 20 days after the February meeting. So we'll start getting closer.
Kerry, to avoid the legal costs in implementing this mediation process, would it be more cost effective for council to organise a sophisticated person or mediator who could broker this deal without legal intervention? I'm just thinking of ways to unnecessarily spend public money, or is that an option?
We're in a legislative process now.
Okay.
So a decision's been made by the Noosa Council, and that when a decision's made, in this case is a refusal, the applicant has the right to appeal that decision within 20 days. They've done that, so they've exercised their right under the Planning Environment Court and the Planning Act of Queensland. So we're in a legislative legal process at the moment. The court, as Kerry talked about earlier, has a particular process that you go through before you get to appeal. Part of that is a mediated process, and there's a court mediator that is appointed to run that process. So that's an established process and a required process. The applicant or the council could ask for mediation to be brought on earlier, so in some situations we bring the mediation on earlier, so to start the process because the parties are pretty keen to get around the table. And in other cases, like Kerry just said, in this one we haven't had any request for mediation at this point, but if that doesn't happen in 3 months' time, the court will require it. So once we're in this process, there's limited scope to require the other party to do a parallel process to that. They've exercised a right, they're using the Planning and Environment Court process to go through mediation.
So just to clarify for people who may be listening at home, the Noosa Council is technically in appeal already, and a legal process is underway.
That's correct,
Yep.
Councillor Wilkie. Yep.
Thank you.
One further question that leads on from that then. What level of legal representation would council be expected to have at a mediation process? Does mediation process be undertaken between staff and their representatives, or do we have legal representation in that mediation process?
So with mediation, we have the option who attends is our decision, and that comes down to what sort of appeal it is and matters involved. With this one, I would expect that the council's planning solicitor, Wakefield Sykes, would attend mediation and be definitely involved, and also myself. So we will often, we will, before mediation, review the matter and look at what options we might be able to put forward in mediation and on table them. Alternatively, depending on the appeal, we may also get some experts involved. We may choose to get a second town planning opinion from an independent planner outside of council to have a second review, a fresh review of the matter and give advice to council. So depending on the appeal, depends our approach.
Look, I'll speak to the motion. Look, I concur with the comments of Councillor Stockwell normally and Councillor Wilkie. Normally I would not look to defer a decision to defend an appeal, but given the circumstances of council being fairly fresh and the appreciation that new councillors want to get a better understanding, and that there being no impact upon the process in this being deferred for another month, I'm quite happy to support Councillor Lawrenson's motion to defer the matter.
Thank you, Councillor.
Question for you, Kerry. You've been involved in town planning and Noosa for quite a while. How significant is the council's practice of defending appeals in its contribution to maintaining the look and feel of Noosa? Is that an unfair question, Mr. Chair?
I actually think it's an unfair question for staff. I
bigger
think that's getting in the policy area.
I think we've all spoken to the motion. Any more questions? No. Councillor Lawrenson, right of reply?
My right of reply is I just want to make it clear that I also agree that the Noosa plan must be defended, that if any developers don't comply to the requirements as set out in the Noosa plan, and if a development application does not meet with community expectation, then yes, we must defend the Noosa plan. My concern is always, have we exhausted other cost-effective options? And that is my only concern. And I appreciate and thank the councillors for allowing the new councillors a little bit more time to exercise due diligence.
Thank you. I might vote on the motion. All in favour?
I'll go and get the two other councillors and we'll just wait till I get the other two back.
The next item on the agenda is in relation to Planning and Environment Court of Appeal number 765 of 2020 relating to the refusal of an application for reconfiguring lots at Eenie Creek Road, Noosaville, also known as the Civic Centre. We might have to move this to a closed session for legal reasons, so we'll put this on as the last item on the agenda for this afternoon. But for those watching at home, just be rest assured, I believe under the regulations under section 275 specifically, no resolution will be passed in a closed session. It will just be a discussion. So councillors, if we can look to number 6 on the agenda on page 51. Council meeting structure and timetables. I'm moving a recommendation as printed in the agenda, and in paragraph B, I would proposing the following councillors: Stockwell, Wegner and Finzel for the Planning and Environment Committee, and councillors Juricevich, Lawrenston and Wilkie for the Services and Organisation Committee. I'm also proposing the following councillors for the chairperson's role as per paragraph C. For the General Committee, Councillor Frank Wilkie. For the Planning and Environment Committee, Councillor Brian Stockwell. And for the Services and Organisation Committee, Councillor Joe Juricevich. Can I call for a seconder on that?
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Look, we've had a number of in-depth discussions in regard to this. In fact, we just had a round table prior to this meeting. Everyone's preferences were discussed and their interest areas put on the table. I think it's a really good balance. I think we've got talent on both sides. I think for the new councillors, it's a learning curve and will be guided by the councillors, the experienced councillors. And I think the chairs are very experienced and well versed in their areas of choice. And I think it's a good mix. So I think we came together again collaboratively in this decision making. And so I think this is a very good structure going forward for this council. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Any questions? No? So,
Yeah, Frank, hold on.
After you,
Brian,
Joe.
would you like to
No, I'm just...
Look, thank you, Madam Chair, for your gracious comments. The other part to this resolution that we're agreeing to here is the structure. I'd like to compliment the councillors for opting for this particular committee structure, which is basically a three-phase process where items come in reports backed by council staff advice, financial, legal advice, town planning advice for councillors to consider at an early stage in the committee, early committees. Those that are disagreed with or requires further discussion by the full council then go to the general committee committee meeting, which is the full council, for further discussion and questions, and then to the final ordinary meeting later that week for final ratification as a decision of the local government. It's a very open and transparent process. All the meetings are public. I also note in here that in the meantime we've resolved to hold the Planning and Environment Committee and the Services and Organisation Committee meetings in this room, which will be live streamed because of the COVID precautions. And I'm hoping that perhaps, I'm speaking personally here, that could continue as a long-term practice if staff are comfortable with that and councillors agree to that. So I commend the councillors for their choice of meeting structure and thank the Mayor again for endorse the Mayor's choice of the makeup of those various committees and chairs. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion?
I'll just concur with those comments by Councillor Wilkie. I think the structure that we've chosen here will be the one that gives the new councillors the best opportunity to get their heads around issues as they come forward, with a greater time frame and an opportunity to understand at 3 different levels all the matters that come before us. I concur with the comments of the Mayor as well with regard to utilising the strengths of the council with the experienced councillors in the interim, being the chairperson of those committees, but again the opportunity for councillors to move between committees, also the opportunity to sit in and be an observer and a background participant, if you like, of the other committees while they find their feet, in particular in the early stages, and the opportunity to, of course, progress into a chairperson's role through this committee, through this term of council, is an opportunity that I'm hoping that you'll relish and will be given the opportunity in due course. So again, I commend council on choosing this committee structure going forward, because I think it's the best that everybody will benefit from.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion or questions? Look, thank you very much, Councillors Wilkie and Drosovic. The only other thing I'd add, and this is probably for the benefit of people who are watching, is that the ordinary meeting is now commencing at 5 p.m, and we all agreed to that because it's a bit more of a, should we say, family-friendly time. It enables staff to get home a bit earlier, and it enables people at home to sort of have, I guess, an earlier night if we have some robust debates, which no doubt we will over the course of the coming months and years. But thank you very much. We'll take a vote on that.
Essentially the only change to the current structure.
Yes. All in favour? Right, no, thank you. Now, we might go back to item 5 on the agenda, which is the we might have to close the session.
So I move that the meeting be closed to the public for the purpose of discussing a planning and environment court appeal and the legal matters surrounding that issue.
Second.
Thank you, Tom.
Just before you take that vote, might be just again reminding the councillors that the council can't make any decisions. If we go into confidential session, all we can do is talk about the issue, and then you must make any decisions when we come back out.
Okay.
Yep. I'm going to take the vote on that.
So all in favour of confidential? Close.
started so we can.
Yeah.
Now, how were we when we left the meeting?
Not quite yet.
We said a wicked beer can on the table.
Yeah.
That's it. That's one we can live with.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Mayor, we're back on. So ready to start again?
Yeah.
So,
We'll get the briefing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you'll get up to speed.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We're back. We're on item number 5. Would anyone like to move a motion in regard to that number 5 on the agenda?
I'll move that, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
so can I suggest that be read out?
Yes,
So what-
Yeah, it's
certainly.
different from what's in the
Yeah.
agenda.
Right. The motion reads that Council note the report by the Manager Development Assessment to the ordinary meeting dated 30th of April 2020 regarding Planning and Environment Court Appeal number 765 of 2020 and A. Agree to defend the appeal, and B. Note the progress of the mediation process and request the Chief Executive Officer to provide a further report to the Council on the outcome of the mediation process once that mediation process has been concluded, and C. Request the CEO to arrange for a briefing of the Council on the background of this application.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. To speak to the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's fairly self-explanatory. Council proposes that we agree to defend the appeal. Mediation is underway, and councillors are very interested in how that process is going. This Part B requires that there be a progress report on mediation as it gets continues, and also the outcome of the mediation process is reported to the councillors once it's concluded, and also we're requesting that the CEO arrange a briefing on the council on the background of this application, because it does have a long history and the new councillors are very keen to get themselves across that, and I think it's only fair.
Yes, look, I think it's a good motion. I do think that as new councillors, this is a very complex issue. As we've been told, one of the most complex. I think it's really important that we have the CEO to arrange a briefing in that regard. I think it's very important that we, look at, acknowledge that the mediation process is well underway. But I think in requesting for the CEO to arrange a briefing is very important in this regard. As I said, there are a lot of issues and complex ones for us to get our heads around, so thank you.
I'd like to note that I do not support this motion. The development application before us is complex, contentious, and in the public interest, and I still feel it requires more than 7 days for us to fully understand and get our heads around even this recommendation. I repeat, the Local Government Act, Councillor Code of Conduct, states that in making decisions in the public interest, councillors must commit to exercising proper diligence, care and attention. I also want to add that we were elected by this community to ask challenging questions, to dig deep on issues and to do our homework. We were elected to do more than merely accept the status quo. Therefore, for me to deliver on this promise, I need more information and time, and I will not be supporting this motion.
Anyone else like to speak?
Look, I will be supporting the motion. The element here that is important is this is a point of process within an appeal process, and it's just getting to that point. The applicant has lodged an appeal, and the council agrees to defend that appeal. The additional information that will come out of this will come out in due course. This is just, as I said, just a point of process in the appeal process.
Just close? Yeah, and look, I do accept that it is a complicated process, especially for new councillors. It was said that it is a complicated application. What we've been asked to consent here to is not whether or not we approve an application. Was complicated. That's been refused already. We're being asked whether or not to defend an appeal, and I think this is the right way forward.
We'll vote on the motion. All in favour? Against? 6. Thank you. There are no further confidential reports, and there are no questions, obviously, from the public. The next ordinary meeting of council will be held on the 21st of May 2020. That is all for today. I declare the meeting closed. Thanks
Well done,
everyone.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.